The grand marble halls of Valdoria Palace had witnessed many ceremonies, but none quite like this autumn evening when everything changed. Prince Alexander stood frozen at the entrance of the throne room, his emerald eyes wide with disbelief as he watched Lady Serena, his father's new consort, reach for the golden crown that had rested on the ceremonial pedestal for 300 years. The evening had begun like any other state dinner. Nobles from across the kingdom gathered in their finest silks and velvets, whispering behind jeweled fans about trade agreements and border disputes. Princess Isabella, Alexander's younger sister, moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her midnight blue gown sweeping across the polished floor as she greeted each guest with the perfect balance of warmth and royal distance. King Magnus sat upon his throne, seemingly unaware of the storm brewing in his own court. At 62, the monarch had grown weary of ruling alone since Queen Elisabetta's death 5 years prior. When Lady Serena arrived at court 6 months ago, claiming to be a distant cousin from the eastern provinces, she quickly captured the king's attention with her charm and beauty. Her raven hair and porcelain skin reminded many of the late queen, though Isabella noticed the calculating gleam in her eyes that her mother never possessed. The trouble began during the traditional toast. As Chancellor Blackwood raised his goblet to honor the kingdom's prosperity, Lady Serena rose from her seat beside the king. The room fell silent, confused by this breach of protocol. Only members of the royal family were permitted to stand during the Chancellor's address. "My dear subjects," Lady Serena began, her voice carrying across the vast hall with surprising authority. The use of "my" sent ripples of shock through the assembled nobility. Tonight marks not just another celebration, but a new beginning for Valdoria. Alexander pushed through the crowd, trying to reach his father, but found his path blocked by guards he didn't recognize. Their uniforms bore the royal insignia, yet their faces were unfamiliar. When had the palace guard been changed? How had he not noticed? Lady Serena continued her speech, each word carefully chosen to weave a web of legitimacy around her actions. She spoke of ancient laws, of succession rights through marriage, of the kingdom's need for strong leadership. As she talked, she moved closer to the crown, her fingers trailing along the pedestal. "Father!" Alexander's voice finally broke through his shock. "What is the meaning of this?" King Magnus turned toward his son, and Alexander's heart sank. His father's usually sharp eyes were clouded, unfocused. The king's movements were sluggish as he raised a hand, not in greeting but in dismissal. "Lady Serena speaks with my authority," the king said, his words slightly slurred. "She is to be your new mother and queen." Isabella, who had been watching from near the musicians' gallery, stepped forward. Unlike her brother's explosive emotion, her response was measured, calculating. She had suspected something was amiss for weeks, noticing the gradual changes in palace routines, the replacement of longtime servants, the mysterious meetings Lady Serena held in the tower rooms. "Your Majesty," Isabella addressed her father formally, her voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "Such a momentous decision surely requires the council's approval. The Valdorian Charter clearly states—" "The charter is outdated," Lady Serena interrupted, her mask of sweetness slipping for just a moment. "Your father and I have discussed this at length. The kingdom needs unity, not bureaucracy." As she spoke, Lady Serena lifted the crown from its pedestal. The ancient gold caught the light from 1,000 candles, sending sparkles dancing across the walls. Several nobles gasped, some in outrage, others in what seemed like rehearsed approval. Isabella noticed Lord Pemberton and Duke Ashford nodding along, though just last month they had been vocal opponents of Lady Serena's presence at court. What had changed their minds? "You cannot simply take the crown!" Alexander's shout echoed through the hall, bouncing off the vaulted ceiling. His hand moved instinctively to where his sword should have been, but formal dinners required guests to surrender their weapons. Another change in protocol he now realized had been orchestrated. "I am not taking anything," Lady Serena said smoothly. "Your father is giving it to me. Tell them, my dear Magnus." The king stood slowly, swaying slightly. Isabella noticed the wine goblet at his place was empty, though dinner had barely begun. Her medical training, undertaken in secret despite court disapproval, recognized the signs of more than mere intoxication. I name Lady Serena my queen and equal ruler," King Magnus announced. "Any who oppose this union oppose the crown itself." The hall erupted in chaos. Some nobles immediately dropped to their knees in fealty, while others backed toward the exits. Alexander tried once more to reach his father, but the strange guards formed a wall of steel and muscle. Isabella, however, remained exactly where she stood. Her stillness in the midst of turmoil drew attention like a lodestone. She had spent years being overlooked as the spare heir, the decorative princess, but she had used that invisibility to learn, to watch, to prepare. While Alexander trained with swords, she had trained her mind in law, history, and the subtle art of court politics. "Lady Serena!" Isabella's clear voice somehow commanded attention despite not being raised. "You speak of ancient laws. Then surely you know the right of challenge." The would-be queen's hand hesitated inches from her head, the crown suspended in midair. The right of challenge was indeed ancient, predating even the Valdorian Charter. It allowed any member of the royal family to challenge a succession through tests of worthiness. "That law hasn't been invoked in 200 years, Lady Serena said carefully. "Yet it has never been repealed," Isabella countered. "Unless you fear you cannot prove your worthiness?" The princess's gambit was dangerous. By invoking the right, she was essentially declaring Lady Serena unfit to rule, a treasonous act if the challenge failed. But Isabella had noticed something others had missed. Lady Serena's careful orchestration showed someone who preferred manipulation to direct confrontation. The woman had expected to seize power through charm and subterfuge, not face an actual challenge. Alexander, understanding his sister's strategy, found his voice again. "I second the invocation of the right of challenge." His words rang with princely authority. "Let all who witness know that House Valdecourt does not yield its crown so easily." The crowd held its breath. According to law, Lady Serena could refuse the challenge, but doing so would mean forfeiting her claim. Accepting meant facing unknown trials that would test not just her strength or wit, but her very right to rule. Lady Serena's perfect composure finally cracked. Her dark eyes flashed with something dangerous as she looked between the siblings. She had planned for many contingencies, but not for the supposedly meek princess to show steel, nor for the hot-headed prince to support his sister's calculated move. "Very well," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the silent hall. "I accept your challenge, Princess Isabella. But know this, when I emerge victorious, there will be no place in my kingdom for those who stood against me." Isabella curtsied deeply, the gesture both mocking and proper. "Then let us begin, my lady. After all, a true queen fears no test of her worthiness." As the crowd parted to create a circle in the center of the hall, Isabella's mind raced through the possibilities. The right of challenge consisted of 3 trials: mind, heart, and spirit. Each would test a different aspect of leadership. She had bought them time, but Lady Serena had not survived this long at court without resources. The woman would not have revealed herself tonight without believing victory was assured. The castle bells began to toll, marking the hour and the beginning of a contest that would determine Valdoria's fate. Alexander moved to stand behind his sister, a living symbol that not all the royal family had bent to Lady Serena's will. The strange guards looked uncertain, clearly not briefed on this ancient protocol. Chancellor Blackwood, recovering from his shock, stepped forward. His loyalty to the true royal line overcame his fear of Lady Serena's supporters. As keeper of laws, I must oversee the right of challenge. Let the ancient words be spoken. As the formal declarations began, Isabella caught sight of movement in the upper galleries. Shadows shifted where no servants should be. Lady Serena had more allies than were visible in the hall. This challenge would be fought on multiple fronts, but Princess Isabella stood firm, her spine straight and her gaze unwavering. She had spent her life preparing for a moment she never thought would come. Now, with her father ensorcelled and her kingdom's freedom hanging in the balance, she would prove that sometimes the overlooked princess could be the strongest defender of the crown. The great hall transformed with practiced efficiency as servants arranged the space for the first trial. Ancient tapestries were pulled back to reveal hidden alcoves containing artifacts from Valdoria's founding. The nobles formed a circle, their faces masks of political calculation as they weighed which side might emerge victorious. Chancellor Blackwood's voice resonated with ceremonial authority as he announced the first trial. The test of mind shall commence. Two who would rule must demonstrate wisdom beyond mere knowledge. The crystal of veritas shall judge. From a velvet-lined box, he produced a multifaceted gem that seemed to contain swirling mists. Isabella recognized it from her studies. The crystal would pose riddles that revealed not just intelligence, but the judgment required of a true monarch. Lady Serena smiled coldly. How quaint. Shall we begin with something simple for the young princess? The crystal pulsed with ethereal light, and a voice neither male nor female spoke from within. Two mothers claim one child. Neither will yield. The true mother would rather lose than see harm come to what she loves. Who deserves the child? Isabella stepped forward without hesitation. Neither deserves the child, for children are not possessions to be deserved. But the child belongs with the one who would sacrifice her claim for its well-being. True love surrenders when holding tight would cause harm. The crystal glowed warmly, accepting her answer. Lady Serena's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Your turn, Lady Serena, the Chancellor intoned. The crystal's voice returned. A kingdom's coffers are empty. The people starve. A neighboring land offers gold for safe passage of their armies through your territory. They claim peaceful intent. What is your decision? Lady Serena answered swiftly. Accept the gold with conditions. Station our own forces along their route. If their intent proves false, we have their gold and strategic position. The people's hunger matters more than hypothetical threats. The crystal flickered uncertainly, neither fully accepting nor rejecting. Isabella noticed several nobles exchanging glances. Lady Serena's pragmatism appealed to some, while others found it troubling. As the trial continued, the questions grew more complex. Isabella drew upon years of study and observation, while Lady Serena relied on cunning and worldly experience. The contest seemed evenly matched until the final question. A ruler must choose, the crystal intoned. Save your beloved from certain death, or save a village of strangers from the same fate. You cannot save both. What choice proves your fitness to rule? Lady Serena spoke first, her confidence unwavering. A ruler must be strong enough to save both. I reject the premise. With proper planning and resources, such choices need not exist. The crystal dimmed significantly. Avoiding the question was not an answer. Isabella felt the weight of every eye upon her. Her voice was soft but clear. I save the village. A ruler's heart must be large enough to break for the greater good. Personal loss is the price of the crown. But I would ensure my beloved understood this choice before accepting such responsibility, for ruling demands sacrifices from those we love as well. The crystal blazed with brilliant light before settling into a steady glow. The first trial was decided. The Princess Isabella prevails in the test of mind, Chancellor Blackwood announced. Lady Serena's supporters shifted restlessly, but she merely smiled. One trial of 3, the night is young. As preparations began for the second trial, Alexander noticed more irregularities. Servants he had known since childhood were absent, replaced by unfamiliar faces. His attempts to locate the regular palace guard had revealed empty barracks and changed patrol routes. How long had Lady Serena been planning this coup? The test of heart required no special arrangements. Chancellor Blackwood explained, "Those who would rule must understand the hearts of their people. You will each be presented with 3 petitioners. Your responses will be judged by the assembly." Isabella watched as 3 figures were brought forward. The first was a merchant whose caravan had been robbed by bandits. The second, a mother whose son had been imprisoned for stealing bread. The third, an elderly scholar whose library had been seized for back taxes. Lady Serena addressed each with calculated responses: compensation for the merchant from increased patrols, a review of the son's case through proper channels, and a payment plan for the scholar. Her solutions were practical, even generous by some standards. When Isabella's turn came, she approached each petitioner differently. She knelt beside the merchant, asking about his family and how the loss affected them beyond mere gold. For the mother, she inquired about circumstances that led to such desperation. With the scholar, she discussed which texts were most vital to preserve for future generations. Her solutions went beyond the immediate problems. The merchant received not just compensation, but a seat on a new council to address trade route safety. The mother's son would serve his sentence teaching literacy to street children instead of languishing in prison. The scholar would become keeper of a new public library, his debt forgiven in exchange for service. But the true revelation came when Isabella asked each petitioner a question Lady Serena had not. "What else troubles you beyond this immediate concern?" The merchant revealed that bandit attacks had increased since certain noble families had reduced their road patrols. The mother explained that bread prices had tripled since new taxes were levied on grain. The scholar noted that several historical texts critical of certain succession laws had gone missing from multiple libraries. The assembled nobles began to murmur. These were not random petitioners but witnesses to a pattern of orchestrated problems. Isabella had uncovered layers Lady Serena had hoped to keep hidden. "Clever girl," Lady Serena hissed, abandoning her pretense of sweetness. But cleverness alone does not make a queen. The judgment of the test of heart was even clearer than the first. The Assembly's response to Isabella's compassionate insight versus Lady Serena's clinical efficiency spoke volumes. As the second trial concluded in Isabella's favor, the atmosphere in the hall grew electric. Lady Serena's supporters were becoming nervous while those loyal to the true royal line began to show renewed courage. Alexander seized this moment of shifting momentum. "Good nobles of Valdoria," he called out, his princely training serving him well. "See how my sister's wisdom reveals truth. Who among you will stand with House Valdecourt?" Several nobles stepped forward, including some who had initially seemed to support Lady Serena. Lord Pemberton was among them, and when questioned, he revealed, "My family was threatened. Lady Serena holds my grandson hostage, but if the princess can prevail—" "Enough!" Lady Serena's voice cracked like a whip. "Lord Pemberton speaks treason. Guards, arrest him!" The strange guards moved to comply, but now faced resistance. Knights loyal to the crown had begun filtering into the hall, alerted by the commotion. The careful military balance Lady Serena had orchestrated was crumbling, yet the right of challenge had to continue. Ancient law demanded all 3 trials be completed once begun. The test of spirit remained. Chancellor Blackwood, though clearly shaken by the evening's revelations, maintained his duty. The final trial. The test of spirit requires each claimant to demonstrate the strength to rule. In ancient times, this meant combat. In our enlightened age, it means proving the courage to face one's deepest fear. He produced an ornate mirror from among the ceremonial objects. The mirror of truth shows each viewer their greatest fear. To rule others, one must first conquer oneself. Lady Serena's confident mask slipped for the first time. "This is archaic nonsense," she protested. "Yet you agreed to the full right," Isabella reminded her, "unless you wish to withdraw your claim." Trapped by her own acceptance, Lady Serena had no choice. She approached the mirror with visible reluctance. As she gazed into its surface, her face went pale. What she saw remained known only to her, but her reaction was telling. She stumbled backward, hands trembling, unable to speak for long moments. When she finally gathered herself, her words were hollow. I have faced my fear. It holds no power over me." But everyone could see the lie. Whatever the mirror had shown her had shaken the would-be queen to her core. Isabella stepped forward, her bearing regal despite her youth. As she looked into the mirror, the audience held its breath. Her face showed a progression of emotions: sadness, determination, and finally, acceptance. "I see myself alone," she said quietly, "crowned but isolated, having sacrificed personal happiness for duty. I see the empty throne beside me, the children I may never have, the love I may never know." She turned to face the assembly. "But I also see a kingdom at peace, a people prospering, justice prevailing. If loneliness is the price of Valdoria's well-being, I pay it willingly." The mirror glowed with warm light, acknowledging not just her courage in facing the fear, but her acceptance of it. King Magnus, who had remained silent throughout the trials, suddenly stood. The cloudiness in his eyes flickered, as if whatever hold Lady Serena had over him was weakening. "Isabella," he said uncertainly, "my daughter, what is happening?" Lady Serena spun toward him, panic replacing calculation. "Magnus, my love, sit down. You're unwell." But the king's confusion was clearing. The trials, the ancient magic invoked by the rite, seemed to be breaking through whatever enchantment held him. "You," he began, staring at Lady Serena with growing horror. "What have you done to me?" The hall erupted. Lady Serena's supporters realized their cause was lost and began fleeing toward the exits. But the loyal knights were ready, blocking escape routes. In the chaos, Lady Serena made one last, desperate play. "If I cannot have the crown through law," she snarled, producing a hidden blade, "I'll take it through blood." She lunged not at Isabella, but at the king. If Magnus died before officially retracting his pronouncement, the succession would be thrown into chaos. But Isabella had anticipated this. Hours of dancing had taught her to move with grace and speed. She intercepted Lady Serena, using the woman's momentum against her. The two women grappled, but it was an uneven match. Lady Serena had relied on schemes and potions, not physical prowess. Isabella, trained in secret by the castle's master-at-arms, quickly disarmed her. As Lady Serena fell to her knees, defeated, the truth began pouring out. Under questioning, she revealed herself as an agent of Valdoria's ancient enemy, the Shadow Court of Morvania. The plot had been years in the making, designed to take the kingdom without open war. Maps were found in her chambers detailing troop movements. Letters revealed a network of spies and collaborators. Most damning was a vial of the poison she had been slowly administering to the king, designed to make him pliable while appearing merely aged. As dawn broke through the great windows, the hall that had witnessed an attempted coup now saw justice prevail. Lady Serena and her key supporters were arrested. King Magnus, freed from her influence, officially recognized Isabella's actions in defense of the realm. But Isabella's true strength showed in what came next. Rather than seeking vengeance, she argued for mercy for those who had been coerced. She established a council to investigate how such a plot had nearly succeeded, implementing reforms to prevent future infiltration. Standing before the throne, still in her ball gown now torn from the night's events, Princess Isabella addressed the assembly. "Let this night be remembered not for the treachery we witnessed, but for the truth we upheld. Valdoria stands because we stood together. The crown is not seized or given. It is earned through service to our people." Alexander stood proudly beside his sister, his earlier shout of defiance having sparked the resistance that saved their kingdom. The nobles, chastened and inspired in equal measure, knelt in genuine fealty. Chancellor Blackwood stepped forward with the crown that had nearly been stolen. But Isabella raised her hand. "That crown belongs to my father. Long may he reign. I seek no throne, only the privilege to serve." King Magnus, his strength returning, placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Then serve as my heir and right hand. You have proven tonight that the future of Valdoria rests in capable hands." The weeks following the failed coup brought revelations that shook Valdoria to its foundations. As Isabella led the investigation into Lady Serena's network, each uncovered thread revealed a tapestry of deception that stretched far beyond the palace walls. In the tower room that had served as Lady Serena's private chambers, royal investigators discovered documents that painted a chilling picture. The Shadow Court of Morvania had been placing agents throughout neighboring kingdoms for decades, with Valdoria merely the latest target. Lady Serena, whose real name was Morgana Blackthorn, was their most accomplished operative. Isabella spent long nights poring over the captured correspondence, her analytical mind piecing together patterns others had missed. She worked alongside Lord Commander Garrett, the reinstated head of the Royal Guard who had been imprisoned on false charges weeks before the coup attempt. "Your Highness," Garrett reported during one late evening session, "we've found evidence of similar infiltrations in 3 other kingdoms. The pattern is always the same. A beautiful woman appears at court, claims distant royal connection, and slowly gains influence over the monarch." Isabella studied the reports, her brow furrowed in concentration. But why reveal themselves now? Lady Serena, Morgana, had father under her control. She could have continued manipulating from the shadows. "Perhaps," Alexander suggested, entering the chamber with a tray of tea and sandwiches, knowing his sister often forgot to eat during these investigations. "Something forced their hand. A deadline or external pressure?" His insight proved correct. Among the coded messages, they found references to a grand convergence scheduled for the winter solstice. All the infiltrated kingdoms were to fall under Shadow Court control simultaneously, creating a new empire spanning half the continent. The discovery prompted Isabella to take unprecedented action. Despite protocol dictating that royal correspondence go through numerous diplomatic channels, she personally wrote to the potentially affected kingdoms, warning them of the danger. Her letters, sealed with her personal signet and delivered by trusted knights, reached their destinations just in time. Queen Alara of Westmarch wrote back within days, reporting the arrest of her new lady-in-waiting who bore suspicious similarities to Lady Serena. King Roderick of Ironhold discovered his recent advisor had been slowly poisoning him, much like what had happened to King Magnus. One by one, the Shadow Court's carefully laid plans unraveled, but victory came with unexpected consequences. The morning after Lady Serena's network in Valdoria had been fully exposed, Isabella found herself in the palace's highest tower, seeking solitude to process the weight of recent events. There, she encountered an unexpected visitor, Lady Serena herself, having escaped her cell through means unknown. "Impressive work, little princess," the woman said, standing silhouetted against the dawn sky. Despite her defeat, she maintained an air of dangerous elegance. You proved far more formidable than our intelligence suggested. Isabella's hand moved to the knife at her belt, a new precaution she had adopted. How did you escape? The guards have their own families, their own weaknesses, Lady Serena interrupted. But I didn't come to fight. I came to warn you. My failure means the Shadow Court will send someone else, someone less civilized in their methods. Why tell me this? Isabella kept her distance, wary of tricks. A complex emotion crossed Lady Serena's face. Because in another life, I might have admired you. You played the game magnificently. Consider this professional courtesy from one strategist to another. Before Isabella could respond, Lady Serena stepped backward off the tower's edge. But instead of falling, she vanished in a swirl of dark mist, magic more ancient and dangerous than anything in Valdoria's libraries. The Shadow Court, it seemed, had resources beyond conventional understanding. The encounter left Isabella shaken but more determined. She immediately convened a council of the kingdom's finest minds, military strategists, historians, magical scholars, and even reformed criminals who understood the underground networks. Together, they began developing defenses against threats both conventional and mystical. King Magnus, his health gradually returning under the care of healers who could now properly treat the lingering effects of Morgana's poisons, watched his daughter's transformation with pride and a touch of sadness. In the throne room one evening, he called both his children to him. "Isabella Alexander," he began, his voice stronger than it had been in months. "You saved not just my life, but our kingdom. But I must ask, at what cost to yourselves?" Alexander spoke first, his characteristic bravado tempered by recent events. "I've learned that strength isn't just about sword work, Father. Sometimes the greatest courage is knowing when to trust others, especially my sister." Isabella smiled at her brother before addressing their father. The cost was innocence, perhaps, but what we gained was invaluable. The knowledge that Valdoria's strength lies not in its walls or wealth, but in its people's willingness to stand against tyranny. The king nodded slowly. "Then I have a proclamation to make. Alexander, you have proven yourself a defender of the realm. I name you Lord Protector, charged with rebuilding our intelligence networks to prevent future infiltrations." Alexander knelt, accepting the responsibility with newfound maturity. The role suited him, action tempered by wisdom. "And Isabella," the king continued, "the kingdom has seen your wisdom, courage, and compassion. I name you Crown Princess and my chief advisor. When my time comes, Valdoria will be in capable hands." Isabella's acceptance was characteristically thoughtful. "I accept, Father, but with conditions. We must reform the succession laws that allowed Lady Serena's claim to seem legitimate. We must strengthen ties with neighboring kingdoms to face the Shadow Court threat together, and we must ensure that never again can our government be so easily compromised." Her conditions sparked months of reform that transformed Valdoria. The old practice of closed council meetings gave way to public forums where citizens could voice concerns. The Guard was restructured to prevent wholesale replacement. Most importantly, a new order of investigators was established. The Veritas Guard, trained to detect deception both magical and mundane. As winter approached and the supposed Grand Convergence date neared, Valdoria stood ready. The kingdom had become the coordinator of an unprecedented alliance. Isabella's warnings had created a network of mutual support among former rival kingdoms. On the night of the winter solstice, when the Shadow Court's grand plan should have culminated in conquest, they instead faced united resistance. Infiltrators found themselves exposed and captured. Magical attacks were countered by coordinated defenses. The supposedly secret convergence points were ambushed by allied forces. Isabella stood on the palace battlements that night, watching signal fires blaze across the landscape, each one confirmation of another Shadow Court cell eliminated. Alexander stood beside her, his armor gleaming in the firelight as he coordinated with field commanders through magical communication crystals. "You realize," he said during a lull, "your actions have changed the balance of power across the continent. The Shadow Court operated in secrecy for centuries. Now they're exposed, weakened, perhaps fatally." Isabella pulled her cloak tighter against the winter wind. "They'll adapt, evolve, find new methods. Evil always does. But so will we. Every kingdom they targeted now knows the signs, has defenses in place. We've bought time and awareness." A month later, as Valdoria celebrated the Feast of Renewal, the palace hosted delegations from across the continent. The great hall where Lady Serena had attempted her coup now witnessed the signing of the Covenant of Light, a mutual defense treaty that would have been unthinkable before the crisis. During the celebration, a young page approached Isabella with a sealed message. The princess recognized neither the seal nor the handwriting, but the contents made her blood run cold. "Well played, Crown Princess. The Shadow Court acknowledges your victory in this round. But the game is far from over. We have played in darkness for 1,000 years. We can wait, we can adapt, and we will return. Guard your bloodline well. It would be a shame if history were to repeat itself." The Council of Shadows. Isabella shared the message with Alexander and her father. Rather than fear, it sparked determination. They had faced the darkness and prevailed. They would be ready when it returned. The story of that dramatic night spread across the kingdom, told in taverns and taught in schools. How Prince Alexander's defiant shout had shattered the spell of compliance. How Princess Isabella had stood firm against corruption and conspiracy. How the crown of Valdoria could not be toppled by schemes and shadows. But Isabella insisted the story include another lesson, that victory came not from royal blood or ancient rights, but from ordinary people choosing courage over comfort, truth over convenience. The guards who refused bribes, the nobles who risked their positions to stand for justice, the servants who carried warnings despite danger, they were the true heroes. Years later, when Isabella finally ascended to the throne as Queen Isabella the Wise, she would look back on that night as the moment she truly understood leadership. Not the divine right of kings, but the earned privilege of service. Not the power to command, but the responsibility to protect. And in the depths of distant shadows, the council waited and watched, planning their next move in an eternal game. But Valdoria stood ready, its people vigilant, its alliances strong. The prince's shout had indeed echoed through the halls, awakening a kingdom to its own strength. The crown had been challenged but not toppled, and the princess who had stood firm had become a queen who would never yield. The transformation of that night rippled outward like stones cast in still water. Other kingdoms reformed their succession laws. The practice of accepting mysterious courtiers ended. Most importantly, the people learned they had power beyond what they had imagined. The power to question, to resist, to demand better of their leaders. Isabella established schools where citizens could learn law and history, ensuring that never again would ignorance be a weapon against them. Alexander created an international network of communication, allowing kingdoms to share intelligence about emerging threats. Together, the royal siblings rebuilt Valdoria, not just as it had been, but as it should be. On the 5th anniversary of the coup attempt, a memorial was unveiled in the palace gardens. Not a monument to royal glory, but a simple stone inscribed with names. Every person who had played a part in defending the kingdom that night, from the highest noble to the humblest servant. Isabella insisted that no distinction be made by rank, for courage recognized no class. Standing before the memorial, Queen Isabella addressed the gathered crowd. Her words were simple but powerful. Let future generations remember that a kingdom's greatest treasure is not gold or gems, but the bonds of trust between ruler and ruled. Let them know that when shadows gather, light prevails not through magic or might alone, but through the choice of ordinary people to do extraordinary things. As the sun set over Valdoria, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the kingdom stood stronger than ever. The Shadow Court remained a threat, but no longer an unknown one. The price of freedom, Isabella had learned, was eternal vigilance, but it was a price her people would gladly pay. The echo of that fateful shout had become a roar of defiance that would resound through history. The crown stood firm, the princess had become a queen, and Valdoria had discovered its true strength lay not in its rulers, but in the courage of its people to stand against the darkness together.